Lazarus, Thoth, dragon currents, and the physics of consciousness. And today, peering into the living frontier where ancient lineage memory meets the science of consciousness. So joining us again, Dalia Ali, whose direct experiences with the entity Thoth and her Egyptian ancestral technologies illuminate a forgotten mastery of elemental forces, and my most beloved, Dan Winter, whose pioneering work in sacred geometry, plasma physics, and the electrical nature of consciousness give us a framework to understand those experiences as real, measurable coherence phenomena. So together, we're going to explore the dragon current, weather shamanism, Kundalini ignition, lineage technologies, and the role of Thoth as a trans-temporal intelligence guiding humanity's next octave of awakening. And just by way of a little background, Dalia is a researcher and experiencer whose work bridges ancient Egyptian lineage knowledge with contemporary consciousness science. And her direct interactions with the entity Thoth and her training in the dragon current, which is the coherent life force once used by Egyptian adepts to work with wind, rain, land vitality, and Kundalini activation, position her as a translator between worlds, forgive me. And she teaches that these abilities were never mythic, but were practical techniques for elemental communication, emotional healing, and planetary coherence. And Christ knows we need that at this time. Dan Winter, needing little to no introduction to any of my networks, the physicist of the sacred and architect of coherence, as we like to refer to him. Dan is the iconic physicist, electrical engineer, and consciousness researcher known globally for his work on heart coherence, implosion physics, and the fractal nature of the soul. So his research explains how attention, emotion, and plasma fields create real electromagnetic structures, the very mechanics behind Kundalini, weather modulation, and the Thoth intelligence legacy. So his collaborations connect esoteric traditions to measurable biophysics, offering a scientific scaffold for understanding the dragon currents as coherent plasma navigation. And if that's not a coherent introduction to these two wizards, I don't know what is. Dan Winter, happy to see you again, brother.
I love it. I love it. You know, and Dalia is doing Magdalene and the Dragon Currents. And David Yarrow, my friend, wrote that book, Dragon in the Ice Castle, about how the dragon currents come alive and you can see them come out of the land. This is going to be fun.
Very good. Dalia, very happy. Oops, wrong format. Very happy to welcome you back to Lazarus.
Thank you, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be here as always. It's going to be a fun conversation for sure. I look forward to it.
Now, where are you situated right now?
Right now, I'm in south of France, in the Pyrenees. I was like 10 minutes away from Dan, but now I moved to a house at the top of the mountain that used to belong to a Tibetan Buddhist monk, actually. And it's this beautiful stretch of land just at the peak, 1,500 feet off the ground. And so beautiful, right off the border with Spain and France.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Should we embarrass Dan by putting him on camera right now? So Dan is bilocated to about 8 meters northwesterly of where he was seated just a minute ago. Don't ask me, folks, what Dan's up to. He keeps disappearing off camera. Well, here we are. So I'll start with you, Dalia. When we speak about dragon currents, are we referring to an energetic metaphor or a literal plasma intelligence woven through the Earth's field? How do you define it from your vantage point?
Yeah, from my perspective and the way that I sense it, it's a very real etheric current. It's in a dimension that is invisible to us, but it's very much influences reality. And it's the force that moves the wind. So you feel the wind, but you can't really see it. It's very similar. but it resides in the etheric dimension that hopefully as we step into the 5D and this collective energetic ascension of humanity, we will be able to view the sacred geometry and to see the sacred geometry that binds reality together in these etheric currents. And that's where the plasma dragon currents live.
Very
in
good.
This dimension.
Very good. Dan, I'm assuming we have you now for the rest of the...
Sorry. So sorry.
Just asking the question, the opening question, when we speak about dragon currents, are we referring to energetic metaphor or a literal plasma intelligence woven through the Earth's field? So just wanting to get your baseline on what are we speaking about when we refer to dragon currents?
Yeah, so I think Dahlia was doing very well when she called it the etheric current and the etheric world. I believe that is actually closely related to what I have been saying for years as the coherent longitudinal array, where when the transverse EMF becomes vortex compressional, implosive, and propagates as a coherent longitudinal or scalar, it enters a nodal array or nest, a kind of fractal like this. So what Dahlia is calling etheric can also be very accurate and measurably in electrical engineering terms called a coherent longitudinal EMF array, literally the physics of lucid dreaming and heaven and where you go after death and what ancestor memory inhabits. And very specifically then, when Dahlia says the dragon current and calling the wind is real, I think what she means in part is the fact that when your body experiences compression from implosive sacred space and propagates coherently into that array, as the ancestors obviously did, the dragon current appears to come alive because, of course, it's literally plasma, but it's alive because then it's implosive, centripetal, and fractal, self-organizing, and becomes self-aware. I mentioned my friend David Yarrow's famous book, Dragon in the Ice Castle, where the dragon comes out of the earth and you see it literally alive. This is living plasma. And this is the whole mystery of biophysics. When does plasma become alive? This is what dragon currents are. This is ancestor memory. And I think Dahlia is right on. And I think electrical engineers need to talk about it. And you can call the wind because you became centripetal enough to inhabit that tornado. Exactly.
Yes.
So I'm Dahlia all the way here.
Very good. Very good. So Dahlia, you've spoken about your Egyptian lineage, teaching the ancient art of dragon riding. For those unfamiliar and for those who didn't see Game of Thrones, what does that actually feel like internally and energetically when the elemental forces respond?
Yeah, well, it feels like you're incoherent with everything. You're basically operating a bliss field, and from that bliss field, you're able to dance with the currents. And so it's more like surfing. It's more like dancing. It's all about flow. And so you realize that your Kundalini currents, your energy life force, can be intertwined and embedded in the life force of the earth or the land that you're inhabiting. If you're somewhere like we are right now, where you're surrounded by powerful mountains, this is where the dragons live. That's where the dragon's lair is. And they do inhabit the mountains. Some of these ancient beings are guardians of the land. But as I've been communicating and connecting with them, they feel so alone and disconnected, like they're doing their thing, but they don't feel connected to the humans because the humans have forgotten the way about connecting with the elementals, the ancient dragon beings that guard the land. And so they've become like an old dog or an old cat that is like just a little bit depressed and distant. Let's just say not feeling very welcome in the villages here by the people that live, because they're so distracted. Everybody's just walking on their phones and they're so concerned with material existence that they've forgotten about connecting with the land. So that it's a very real thing and so being a dragon rider is about reviving that relationship to the sacred currents of the land, and also about communicating to the higher dimensional beings, and tuning into their power and connecting with them to repair really the planetary grid of the planet, which could use a lot of repair, as you probably know, and as you are doing in your work too.
Beautiful.
So
yeah. Dan, from a coherence perspective, and I know you touched on it in your introduction, but from a coherence physics perspective, how is it possible that human consciousness can generate wind, call rain, or achieve weather harmonization? So meaning to say, could you drill momentarily into the hard mechanics of what's happening in the plasma field?
Yeah. Just to say, I love it that Dalia actually got the names of some of the local dragons. One of them is called Maria. Our town is Maria. And the famous geobiology school, Jan Lipnik here, they've got the names of the dragons too. They're talking to them. It's a wonderful thing. Wow. And just a last anecdote before I go to the physics. When Muad'Dib in Dune rode the dragon current, the sandworm in Dune, how did he do it? He pulled apart the segments on the worm to create a still point, where from that created still point between the waves, literally the implosion point, by focusing, pulling apart, then he created a still point on the sandworm where that part of the sandworm would never go under the sand. And therefore, he navigated the worm by creating a still point. Okay, now that I didn't answer your question, but no, the physics here is about the still point, that obviously when you become, we call phase conjugate or implosive, you generate literally a centripetal force. And not to do too many metaphors here, but I was with my teacher at that time, Susan Ambrose, who studied with the Hopi grandfather Dan, and I saw her many times call the wind using the sacred blue corn of the Hopi. And we knew why that corn could call the wind. I saw it happen many times. That was a corn so sacred that if you sang the right song, it would germinate. And it was a family pet for 1,000 years. And so that DNA was literally music. It was very self-aware. So the physics is that if you become centripetal enough, like if you watched a shaman steering a tornado and he says, I'm eating the hucha or eating the anger, I'm embedding, and you see the bioplasmic streamers of the shaman embed into the tornado. And the amount by which the shaman is centripetal is a measurable electrical value for his conscious power. And that centripetal force is exactly what embeds in the tornado and steers it. The psychology of which is the tornado fell in love with the shaman because the shaman felt the tornado's pain better than its own. And the pain of that tornado obviously was the metal on the land, which was causing the fractality to bleed, the definition of pain. And so suddenly the shaman is actually the savior of that tornado, because the shaman understands that that dragon current or tornado or sandworm or plasma current is alive only to the extent that it can inhabit a coherent fractality, which is bleeding on the land, which is why these dragons are in pain.
Sweet, sweet. You know, you talk about the blue corn of the Hopi. It just made me remember, you know, I've been around the world multiple times. All I do is travel. And, you know, I've collected artifacts and special relics and bits and bobs over 25 plus years from every exotic location you can imagine. So all the pyramids and deserts and, you know, the Ephesuses and the, you know, Parthenons and the Zimbabwe ruins, all these different places around the world. And the one thing that and in Mexico, at my base there, I have hundreds of these rocks and stones and relics and things. But the thing that's most valuable to me, I've often felt this by shutting my eyes and going, which of these things would I grab and keep if I could just grab one? It always lands with the blue corn that the Hopi elders gave me. Every time I say, that's all that I want to hold in my hand and leave with, you know, if the place went on fire. And I've often wondered, what is this connection to that blue corn? But you elaborated on that beautifully, Dan.
Yeah. So the last thought was that we have a beautiful site on the physics of rainmaking, goldenmean.info/rain, including the film of the teachers whose children saved the village by making rain, by lining up the sacred stones in a little labyrinth and a cross. And when the children danced around that, they called rain in time to save the village from the firestorm. And the teacher documented. You see the film, goldenmean.info/rain.
So cultures worldwide, from the rainmakers, okay, speaking of rainmaking, to Moses with his staff, they all worked with these forces variously. That's clear. So what do you think caused humanity to lose this capacity, this innocence in that sense, or coherence? And what is reawakening it now? What is the force that is emerging as grace that is awakening that capacity now? So that's, yeah, and we'll get on to Thoth specific questions in a moment with Dalia. But Dan, your answer to that, from the rainmakers to Moses with his staff, what do you think caused humanity to lose this capacity?
I do think Moses' famous horns were a manifestation of the ventricle liquids crystallizing, a physics by which the phonon geometry of the physics of Kundalini manifests in the horniness of the horns of Moses, was a manifestation of Kundalini, obviously, which is that force which then inhabits the land. Unfortunately, on the other side of this coin, we have Dalia's detailed story of the problem of Moses Akhenaten having actually betrayed the Thoth family line by inviting in a giant parasite. So, but this is another story. But your direct question of how did we lose that is the same as the question is how did we lose the ability to invite Kundalini, which is to say actual dense bliss process, which is now virtually illegal in every country on the planet. To have bliss is the closest thing to being illegal anywhere.
Right.
And we now know where that goes.
Yeah, indeed. Dalia, your relationship with Thoth is experiential, not theoretical, but how did that contact begin? And what does Thoth wish humanity to remember at this stage of the timeline split, so to speak?
Yeah, I can answer that, but I also wanted to comment on your other question, because it's quite a complicated subject when you talk about the Moses staff and how he parted the sea. Well, to understand that Moses was trained in the ancient Egyptian magical arts. He was a magi, and he was indeed Akhenaten before he became Moses. And when you look at the ancient Egyptian history, it has been documented in a couple of papyri that this has happened before, like maybe 1,000 years, even before Akhenaten or Moses parted the sea. There was a famous priest in the ancient Egyptian empire at the time, and he parted the sea to look for one of the beautiful women that was on the ship on this trip down the Nile. The king took like 20 beautiful women with him down the Nile, and one of them lost her ring. And so he asked the priests to help them find the ring. And so he parted the waters, and he indeed found her ring. So that was the first documented case of parting the sea. So Moses did not invent the wheel. He basically came from a lineage of ancient Egyptian magical arts. The problem with that is the utilization of black magic. And that's when these magical powers, we call them magical, but magic is a misunderstood word. In Egypt, it's called Heka. Heka is the power you have when you become implosive, when your DNA is implosive. You have Heka, which means you have the language, which is essentially microwave currents. The way that we understand the weather shamanism, it's about projecting microwave currents. And Dan, of course, can explain this much better than I can, through your surroundings. And this is how you activate the wind and you generate rain, so on and so forth. So the problem with that is if you use this for selfish purposes, to control people, not to help people or support the land, this is when humanity gets in trouble. And so coveting the power for selfish means is exactly the problem of humanity right now. It has been since the time of Akhenaten, and it still is. It's a problem of greed and control. So the cycle keeps repeating itself. And the way to stop this is to become selfless and to have pure intention, pure heart, which is for the harmony of all beings. And this is when we speak about the laws of Ma'at. So essentially, when we come back to Thoth, who is my higher self guide, and he has many avatars, he operates through many people all over the planet. And he's known as the ibis, right? He's known as a representation of half ibis, half man. And I've seen his form in the etheric, and he's shown me how many eyes he has, as many as people that he guides on this current reality. And so he is a guardian of humanity, repairing the fabric of time, repairing humanity, repairing the destruction that has been inflicted by these corrupt forces that seek to destroy the planet and to destroy the planetary grid for their purpose, for their selfish means and selfish desires. Right. And this is mainly the collective agenda, you can say, for the time being.
Very good. I mean, of course, it always brings us back to that foundational question. Well, if the creator was also fucking wise and wonderful and perfect and in coherence at the outset, how did it evolve into such a galactic shit show? It does raise those delightful questions. But to the other piece, return to the still point, return to innocence, coherence, as Dan would put it, is the path of least resistance to the highest outcome. And it's a self-organizing, self-realizing principle. When we choose to stop hurting, when we choose that we've had enough pain and allow just to default, move back into the template, the immanent default is to move into a centripetal kind of counter spin to the false light matrix. And that naturally, seamlessly brings us back into that still point, that coherence. And a return to immanence, which is a return to innocence. So yeah, indeed, just self-organizing principles, if we just acknowledge those and fell back into them, that's the angel catching us, is the self-organizing principles, self-reveal, self-exist. But Dan, many see Thoth as an archetype and others as a real trans-temporal intelligence. How do you interpret Thoth within the physics of memory, recursion, and plasma beings?
Well, the famous Emerald Tablets of Thoth, as above, so below, is obviously a name for an introduction to the actual physics of fractality. And by that, on a planet here where no scientist has any clue why anything is centripetal, that lesson is essential. You could call it the caduceus of Hermes, which is Thoth, which in physics is called phase conjugation, or charge collapse. And that ability to implode is what Thoth tried to teach, obviously. And it is the lesson of that centripetal force, ability to make a still point and therefore get leverage, which is also precisely what is meant by the famous Templar agenda of the repair of the fabric of time, which Dahlia referred to, which is my lifetime friend, William Buehler, the famous Templar, goldenmean.info/Buehler, Buehler, who spent his entire life talking to Thoth basically every day. And what Thoth said basically every day, in addition to that, Magdalene was his daughter, which is true, and Dahlia can explain. But that what he meant by the fabric of time, now that we know that time is simply only a name for the experience of relative spin rates, and if spin rates do not embed, get fractal, they don't become implosive or centripetal or create the charge collapse that makes the centripetal force, which is the cause of not just gravity, but consciousness, all life force, and all negentropy. So obviously, this is also a definition of what this Thoth is meant by the master alchemist being a name for that precise principle of enabled charge collapse, non-destructive charge collapse specifically. So this is and not just the last little thought about, I love Dahlia mentioning the microwave aspect. I just have to do 30 seconds on my favorite. So I was there with Bob Dratch measuring Kundalini 1.91 angstroms, the physics of ATP, which is phase conjugate to Planck. Exactly. Not only could you measure Kundalini along the spine with that microwave, but then you put the antenna on the horizon, and the Earth grid is profoundly symbiotic conductive to exactly that microwave. In other words, the whole caduceus cascade called Planck fire, that charge collapse, is the name of the principle of that embedding called the repair of the fractality of time, the repair of the fabric of time. And so when we embed in that array properly, we can become centripetal with the whole array. Obviously, I could carry on, but...
Yeah. Well, is the dragon a symbolic encoding of Kundalini in that sense, or a literal intelligence connected to the Earth's magnetic lines. Just can humans still develop a relationship with these beings, essentially?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So the dragon is a name for the physics of the fact that when the plasma current becomes implosive in us, it literally is the beginning of self-awareness. And when that dragon current does that inside your body, it's called Kundalini, and it feels like lightening up your tailbone. But you do learn how to steer tornadoes if you do that correctly, and you become an antenna for great storms. On the other hand, if you do it incorrectly, you go nuts pretty quick.
Yeah, but the dragons are not symbolic, and I think that's important to just know, because for example, the dragon that I'm communicating with here in the Pyrenees, she's an elderly mother. She's very much an alive intelligence. She is a living what do you call it, primordial intelligence. She has a name. Her name is Mama Ria, and she has dimensional manifestations. So she exists as a dragon. She also exists as a woman goddess. And that's where the Mama Ria becomes Maria. And that's where we have Maria, as in Mary, as the divine mother of Christ, of Jesus, Isa. And so we have had the actual Maria, the physical Mary, as the human embodiment of that mother. So this is where humans can understand that we have ancestors that are intelligent beings that are beyond the human physical embodiment, and they can manifest in the higher dimensions as well as dragon beings. We cannot see them with our eyes, but we can see them with our third eyes in telepathic visionary communication. That's when we can really tap into this other dimension of reality that is beyond the material felt, measurable felt sense. This is something that requires your mind to liberate. It requires your mind to have wings. So you move from the reptilian consciousness, you evolve to the mammalian consciousness, which we are at right now. But then you have the bird consciousness, which is when you learn to have wings. And this is really when you can see beyond the physical domain, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Like a
and
serpent
then
bird.
That's how we connect with the dragons. Yeah, and the higher beings.
Like Quetzalcoatl when the serpent feeds the eagle and Serpent Birdman. Last thing, since the village here is named Ria, so Mama Ria is called Mama Ria for the same reason the pizza shop here is called Pizzeria. I'm sorry.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Well, you know, on the
town where, the town's called Ria. Yeah, it's all connected.
Sorry.
On the subject of dragons, let me just speak to this momentarily. 2008, 9, 10. 9, 10, 11. I was very heavily involved with a very brilliant scientist, physicist, Ralph Larsen in Sweden. And at that point, I was involved in financing some of the work there, and I was holding the patents to some of his work to protect him. And he was a very wealthy, accomplished man. He's still alive. But we were working with many sensitives from around the world and crystal scouts. And we had developed a crystal which was grown off the aggregate frequency of the collective human heart. Dan, you remember Professor Roger Nelson with the egg noosphere project, where he tapped into the collective brain wave, so to speak, of humanity with these eggs planted around the world. Ralph Larsen had done a similar project privately, developing something called the Gaia antenna. Brilliant science. And he managed to attune into the collective heart signature of the human family, indigo human family, and was able to pull that frequency in the laboratory into what he called a subspace chamber, which cost us, I think, 16,000 euros in 2009 to suck the air out of this chamber so that it was kind of 0 point, and in the lab, and essentially attuned crystals that had been sourced by these crystal scouts, phenomenal crystals from Nepal and elsewhere, and trained these crystals into this, attuned that frequency of the collective human heart into the crystals. Well, the problem was that once those crystals came out of the sealed chamber, having been grown or attuned to this Gaia antenna induction phenomenon, anyone who touched the crystals would immediately lose consciousness and collapse in the lab. Bang, drop. Sensitives, mystics, people who were psychic would immediately feel this incredible effect of these crystals. We ended up having to put the crystals in carbon sleeves, literally, clad them in carbon sleeves, and then they could be held. And we carried them and took them around the world. We're actually planting these crystals, what we called then the daughter crystals. We grew one mother crystal, and then off the mother, in another technology, attuned these daughter crystals. And they were being sent all around the world. I know, because I was financing it like the idiot that I am. And we were putting these crystals in key locations around the world. My point being this, I'm getting the permissions to finally speak about that stuff and show the photographs and all the hard data. It was phenomenal science work, incredible. And we ended up working with over 200 ayahuasca and Santo Daime masters as well in the course of those years, who were also helping guide the process. Blistering stuff came out of it, including Margot Anand disappearing out of the pyramid that we built in Bali, which was connected into the experiment. So Margot Anand just joined me. Actually, we were in Egypt together a couple of weeks ago. We did Greece, Egypt, Cyprus, and Turkey with a group of about 55 people. And Margot was happy to speak for the first time publicly about what happened that day when she disappeared for about 45 minutes out of our pyramid in Bali on my watch, when I literally thought, how the fuck am I going to explain to the planet that Margot Anand has disappeared? She was bringing the Song of the Immortals, Dan, from Nepal, which she learned from Burma, which she learned, and bring it into the pyramid experiment. Anyway, long story short, and to bring it back to this, what Dalia was just saying, toward the end of those 3 years of intense experimentation, a little white dragon appeared alongside our lead mystic or sensitive who'd been helping to guide process. And that little white dragon started appearing to all the different sensitives connected to this experimentation. And this little baby dragon, very playful, very mischievous, was assigned such a powerful totem at that. It was literally flying alongside the airplane of Granny Muffin, who was our oldest sensitive. She's about 90 years old, and she looked out of an airplane and saw the thing flying next to the plane. So at that time, we're going back 2009, 10, 11, my whole world for 2 or 3 years was all about dragons and about what these very advanced kind of sensitives were able to witness in that elemental plane. So I'm super tuned into that conversation. I'm just excited to hear it here, and to also, apprehend the idea that perhaps we are collectively now about to tip the scales and move back into that return to innocence, where those extant phenomenon are going to become again a part of the great revelation to humanity. Because, dear God, kind of fuck the UFOs, flying saucers and all that stuff. I mean, honestly, how absurd. Do you want to see a flying saucer, some Nazified metallic object, or would you rather see an elemental dragon? Well, I think I know which most good humans would prefer to see. You know what I'm saying?
But there's something that Nelson very rarely admitted about his Princeton noosphere egg picking up the collective unconscious, like when 3,000 people died on 9/11. It controlled his random number generator, but he didn't explain very well that what was in there was called a Josephson junction, which is a super dielectric picking up a square wave. In other words, prehensive to a longitudinal array. And by the way, now they know if you put those Josephson junctions into a rose-like pattern on a cone, not only gravity and 0 point, but literally it's the implosive way we make the kind of plasma also that Dalia has experienced with the Therify and now Firay.com, which is the elementals come over almost every time because they love this stuff. And Dalia might want to tell about her initiation in plasma. It's up to you, but anyway.
Please do, Dalia, please do.
Yeah, well, that's what started everything. That's what started my remembrances, was my out-of-body experience that happened when I was in Maui, Hawaii in 2023. At the time of the equinox, I had experienced myself in a plasma capsule that is large enough to house a full-bodied person. And I was in the body of my higher self. At the time, I received the name Ningishzira, who is also known as Thoth, but that is his Sumerian name, Ningizira. And it was an incredible experience where I experienced the DNA implosion in my higher self body. And that's when he had acquired an immortal body. And that was under the supervision of his father, also known as Enki, who is the creator of the technology. Him and Thoth are very much, Thoth is more well known for the creation of the Caduceus and the resurrection technology, but it really starts with his father Enki. And so this is when I understood who I am, and this is what I understood my higher self identity beyond the shape and face and name, the human small identity that we carry. There's a much larger higher self identity. And so a year after that, I was going to the conference to see Dan for the first time face to face. I had been following his work for a long time, but I had somehow missed the plasma Therify machine because I didn't know that it existed really. So I went to the conference and they had the plasma, they had the Therify available to try. And so I found myself on the massage bed, and I'm re-experiencing my out-of-body experience again. And I'm recollecting the same physical sensations that I had already undergone in my out-of-body experience in my higher self body. And it turns out that I had the Therify experience on the same date, September 23, but the year after. So what this showed me is this was not a coincidence, and that my small self had to undergo this plasma peak experience again. And that's what enabled me to remember my past lives. Mm-hmm. And they're all connected to the higher self memory of Ningizira Thoth, because he had gone into different avatars throughout humanity. Some of them are known as Quetzalcoatl, like his presence in South America, for example. That is the same intelligent being that is Thoth, but seeding different cultures throughout the planet. But because of my ancestry and my Egyptian DNA, I'm born and raised in Egypt and 100% Egyptian. So that allows me to embed in the memory of the Egyptian timeline, which is a pretty old timeline. And the lives that he had incarnated in were Tutankhamun and Jesus Isa. They're about 1,500 years or 1,300 years apart from each other. They're pretty old. And that is where his role to fix the fabric of time and to fix the timeline of humanity is him volunteering to come back, return on Earth, and re-experience and heal all of these physical traumas from these past avatar incarnations. Mm-hmm. Because when you mess with an immortal, it creates a hole in time. It creates a distortion in the timeline of humanity, and it affects the entire collective. And so by him finally agreeing to reincarnate again, even though his past life memories were pretty painful. You have the life of Jesus Isa, and that was incredibly painful. And then before that was the life of Tutankhamun, even more painful. So this is the healing work that I'm here to do on his behalf. And this is what my mission is in this reality, is to go back and to remember these memories. I remembered how Tutankhamun was murdered, for example, and that was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. To remember a death memory, that is not easy to
Can you speak?
To remain alive. Yeah.
Can you speak?
So I remembered my life as Tutankhamun, and I had started to gather memories, and then as soon as I was ready, I remembered the death memory, and in the same night I remembered two death memories: the death memory of Tutankhamun and the death memory of Jesus Isa. And the most tragic one and the most painful was the Tutankhamun, because he was murdered through his right eye. And he was murdered by conspirators who wanted to steal the power, who later took the throne from him, which was I, who is a priest, as well as Horemheb, who is a military general. That shows you exactly the metaphor and what's wrong with humanity right now, which is the power had been stolen from the deified royal king or pharaoh, Tutankhamun, and went into the hand of a black magic priest and then to a military general. And the black magic priests are today's politicians. And of course, the military generals, we know who they are. We have military dictatorship in Egypt right now. And of course, this is beyond Egypt. This is all throughout the planet. The same corruption in different forms. So unfortunately, that was how he was murdered, and it was the most gruesome, painful experience I've ever had to remember.
How old was Tutankhamun?
Well, we have actually the historical details that tell us that he died about 18 or 19. So that's pretty accurate in my experience, because he was a teenager when he died. And when I experienced this memory, he's a teenage boy. He never had a normal childhood. And he was in a suffering, disabled body. It was not because what people say about him, because of incest, and his brother was his father was his sister's husband, or that's not because of that. It was because of the use of black magic. That's where Nefertiti comes in. And Nefertiti who is the daughter of I, she has had the agenda to take over the power from the Egyptian royal bloodline and put it into the hands of her family. So it was planned from since he was little. She had unfortunately infected him with a black magic hex, which is very real. If you go to Africa, which you do, that's a very real thing. Black magic is very real over there, and people use it to attack each other all the time. It's still used to this very day. But what's behind the black magic is we're talking about the extraterrestrial parasitic entities that are leeching off the energy of humanity. And the use of black magic is the sure way to bring in this parasitic influence. And that's what I'm here, and that's what we're here right now as a collective also recovering, is like, we need to dispel and push back all these negative entities that have been brought by the use of black magic means. And black magic is being used in the...
Yes. While Dalia is frozen, maybe just to speak to that for just a moment, that when Dalia looked
agendas, black magic behind.
Just to expand on what you're saying, Dalia, that when you looked into the entity behind Nefertiti that also sucked in Akhenaten, remember the turning point in its history was when Akhenaten Nefertiti announced the one god Atun, which we now know as Black Sun, Black Saturn, interstellar parasite from Andromeda driven by the Mitra and the local Etorthans. That is the source of this black magic. And when Dalia looked at the mushroom-headed gray inhabiting the body of Nefertiti, thank you, that these were the grays that the Aboriginals called Wandjina. And then the next picture, if you're being so helpful, the next picture is this is the mushroom-headed gray who was talking to Crowley. And now when Dalia described what she saw behind Nefertiti, this interstellar parasite, which we think is Black Sun Atun, which then infected the core origin of all of major Western religions and the Western mystery traditions. Vincent Bridges remembered being Crowley. So suddenly we see a central parasite, an interstellar galactic parasite, which Penny Bradley has described very well, Black Sun Atun parasites, an AI parasite, which is the source of this black magic, which our shaman now, Jake and Alabar, are dealing with very explicitly. So anyway, I think this is a tragedy because all the Western religions are now a conveyor belt into that same parasite because of Nefertiti Akhenaten and Dalia's story. That's my opinion.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So Nefertiti, the Hillary Clinton of her day, by best accounts, and also kids. don't fuck with the immortals. Okay, that's what we've definitely
right.
learned.
Dahlia said that too. Exactly.
So Dan, your work suggests that when the human heart becomes electrically coherent, it can interact with the Schumann resonance. So does this explain ancient weather rituals and dragon riding techniques? Yeah.
Well, so what used to be plancfire.com, P-L-A-N-C-K, plancfire.com, which is now fractalgut.com, which is the world's top unified field physics confirmed by Grok 4, and the best unified field physics on planet Earth is based specifically on that principle that the Schumann cascade is the phase conjugate pump wave, which is identical with the brain harmonics, the breath harmonics, and exactly what motorizes pyramids to make global wireless power. They breathe that same literal charge collapse implosion. So the heart and brain and breath and Kundalini systems, they're all precisely tuned golden ratio times power of Planck, called phase conjugate fractality, which is specifically the Schumann harmonics, which is specifically the alpha to gamma cascade that makes brainwaves, make Kundalini and bliss. It's all the same pure physics of charge collapse. And when you repair the fabric of time to embed in that spin density implosion, yes, you get global wireless power. Yes, you get bliss. Yes, you inhabit the longitudinal array. Yes, you're a lucid dreamer. And by the way, the same plasma triggers clairvoyance, the physics of inhabiting the array. So I can carry on, but the physics is very clear. And now we think there's no physicist on the planet who's ever said we've got anything wrong at fractalgut.com. We absolutely know the cause of gravity, consciousness, life force, all negentropy, and all action at a distance. It's that same charge collapse physics, and we have the details, man. It's powerful.
Very good. Are we witnessing the return of a planetary priesthood, one that blends physics, lineage, memory, and direct contact with higher intelligences? That's to either of you.
Planetary priesthood. But Dahlia, did you want to? Well, I think Jake, our astral Orma shaman, and Alabar, who's teaching people how to navigate the astral, these are the real priests. And Dahlia, when she teaches people, she's coordinating our luciddreamteam.com. This is the real priesthood, those who can empower people to get coherent in the astral. And when we have groups of people who lucid dream together and navigate the astral together, we do have an immune system as a planet, and we can deal with these parasites.
Yeah. Yeah. Any comment on that, Dahlia? Are you the new priest?
Yeah, I would say I'm the old ones. It's really the return of the ancient ones. Yeah. And I can say that already I've met a chunk of, like, I've met my team. So in my out-of-body experience, I also saw my team of higher selves, and they are incarnated here on this earth, and we met, and we are carrying on the planetary grid work, and we are about to embark on further healing work with people. We have plans coming up for the spring, me and Dan and Annie Williams, and we're going to do a dragon current retreat. But the real purpose of this is to work with the collective generational trauma and to heal that. And we've actually done that in the last conference here with Dan, and we created a blend of internal family systems, like family constellations, but then we took it a bit further. We take the personal, and then from that, and through the energy, what you would call the priest work or the magician work, which is really about creating coherence in the timeline of humanity where the trauma is. So you take the personal, and then you realize that the person is nothing but a seed for the collective, and it's recurrent. All the same patterns of suffering across the genealogy, across the different timelines. We worked with the Jewish timeline. We worked with alleviating the suffering, the generational suffering of a lot that lives in a lot of the Jewish families. And we do it by energetic means. And this is where the magical working comes in, but it's through the work with Gaia and through the work with the planetary grid is we're able to lift this charge of resistance, this pain. I am able to take it into my body, into my vessel. This is where the resurrection technology comes in. This is where the death and rebirth comes in. And you create a new pattern. You create a new timeline where the blockage or the pain or the suffering turns into bliss. It sounds fantastical and it sounds almost too easy, but if you were there to witness it, you will see that is beyond easy. And this is why one person cannot do it by themselves. It has to be a collective gathering, a collective intention. And then the specifics are within the team. And they know, they remembered their skills. We activate each other. So when you're in the physical presence, you learn by symbiosis and osmosis, and it awakens the dormant memories. And then you're able to harness and activate these forgotten skills and bring them into the alive now. And this is the shift. This is the ascension. This is the planetary shift that we're undergoing. It's happening on a planetary level. It's very physical. It's very real, but it's also connected to the heavens, the cosmos, and our galaxy, the entirety of our galaxy, really.
It was amazing. We were doing radical family constellation therapy with Dalia and actually Carla Sevilla. Radical family constellation therapy, releasing huge family trauma. And suddenly Dalia and the group were out in the field and they had a face in the clouds and wind, calling the wind. And it became racial family constellation therapy for a planet-wide. Amazing.
Interesting. So Dan, what is the distinction between a Luciferian and a Satanist?
Oh, I think that's a trick question. You know, a lot of people believe that Lucifer lost the PR war because he didn't have the budget with Enlil versus Enki, and that Enki lost the PR battle. That's why they call him, and they call that black meteor Lucifer's eye, which now we know was the glass meteorite, which became the powder which Kelly and Dee use projective powder for making their alchemy, which, by the way, now they rotate around that meteor and they get imbued with the black goo, and suddenly Lucifer's eye takes on many new levels of meaning. So, you know, as a myth here, I think, you know, Lucifer was often, not always, but often a metaphor for Enki versus Enlil, actually, right. The winged one. But
so okay, let me refine the question. What I'm trying to get to is the parallels between bird and snake.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Cain and Abel, Enki and Enlil, Satan and Lucifer.
Well, I mean, I think it's good to start with the biophysics there. Obviously, the snake brain, the mouth of the snake brain called amygdala, and the snake brain feeds the bird brain and Quetzalcoatl returns, and out the mouth of the amygdala comes the Sanchidan, which is literally, in a way, the sex juice, which then implodes the wings of the ventricle horns, which then projects as the wings that Dalia is talking about. So the biophysics of Kundalini, I think, is a good introduction to the serpent birdman metaphor, which is the Kundalini enabled, obviously. So at that level, it can be taken very biologically and very literally. Now, you know, I find it a bit appalling that Michael Salas says Donald Trump is saving us from Satan. I mean, this is every childish metaphor of ridiculousness you'd ever want to see. Whereas really the principle is the biophysics which inhabits here. And so I think we should study this as biophysics.
So Dan, I understand what Salah is saying there, and maybe even got some of that from me. I don't know, because I've been saying for some time, because this is my intuition on the matter, that the distinction in this sense between the Luciferic and the Satanic is blood rights. As the Luciferians, and one could almost say that the Putins of this world and the Donald Trumps of this world, you know, are connected to that old divine right to rule bullshit, which frankly also keys into the ancient Egyptian lineages and pharaonic dynastic lineages. But the point is that they're not conducting blood rites, black magic, whereas the satanic forces, and one could throw the Clintons, Bidens, Bushes, and the rest of them into the satanic without any question of doubt. We know that. We've taken so many testimonials in the tribunals on what's been going on generationally within that enclave of families. So the blood ritualists, the ones who conduct blood rites, and the satanic, the ones that seek foundationally the desecration of God's children and of God's creation and rejoice in it, as opposed to the Trump Putin kind of phenomenon, which is more false light, Luciferian. You're still into power and dominion, but not seeking the desecration of God's children. Quite the opposite, just wanting to command and control. That, to me, is the distinction between the Luciferic element that we see playing out and the satanic element from which we appear to be departing now, courtesy of that Trump-Putin alliance, to those who know what's really going on in that basement.
But I think, again, the Satan and Lucifer metaphor become confused and childish at some point. However, again, back to the biophysics, those who are not able to have their own source of bliss are absolutely, by definition, a parasite and must suck on the loose plasma, the blood of others. So those who will never have their own source of bliss absolutely are condemned to be parasites, like the gold powder addicted ascended masters, et cetera, et cetera. So the difference, and actually Benny Bradley refers to this in terms of the Dragon Legacy famous book, the two basic branches. And the two basic branches, ultimately it's simple. Those who have a shot at some form of bliss, therefore they're not condemned to be a parasite forever. Those who have access to no source of bliss and are condemned to be a parasite forever, whether they're sucking on loose or blood. So you could differentiate it biologically between what is parasitic, and what is parasitic is simple. Those who have no source of bliss have no source of their own charge.
Very good. So in closing, Dalia, your take on the malevolent reptilian forces, archaeohistorically, and to the dragons. What's they're both kind of reptilian creatures. So where did this bifurcation happen between the diabolical, malevolent reptilian element and the mythic dragon element?
Yeah, well, to begin with, how do you tell the difference between Mother Teresa and Hitler, for example? Like, they're both humans, right? But there's a huge difference between the two. So we can't overgeneralize.
That's a dangerous metaphor, respectfully, Dalia, because we all know who Mother Teresa was, and she certainly wasn't a saintly woman.
No,
but
she was a bit parasitic.
She was an absolute parasite. Yeah.
Oh, really? Well, maybe I don't know that part. Well, let me think of somebody who's not.
It was messy.
Oh, yeah.
Messy.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, maybe that's the wrong metaphor then.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hey, Princess Diana.
Princess Diana. Yes, I love Princess Diana. Actually, Princess Diana was an incarnation of Tutankhamun's mother. When I had remembered my mother, I had remembered her.
That's why I loved
Princess
her.
Diana.
I loved her.
Reincarnation of his actual mother.
Thank you.
Who unfortunately got murdered. Yeah,
that helps me.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, the whole world loved her archetypally, Dan, precisely because of that mythic resonance, right? Presumably.
Yeah, wonderful.
Interesting.
Hey,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dalia.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dalia. Yes.
Yeah.
So the difference between them, we're looking at the difference.
Well, yeah, I mean, you were talking about Lucifer and the Luciferian archetype and the
speaking
satanic
about the dragon, the mythic dragon, being an immensely powerful and affirmative totem compared to the malevolent Draco reptilian element.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I would say that not all dragons are created equal. There are dragons that are helpful and compassionate with humanity. And there are dragons that are more destructive in nature. And everything has a role in the universe. So when you step out of dualistic thinking, you will see that there are life forces and there are death currents. There's a death current and there's a life current, and they all work together to create some semblance of balance in the universe. So you have black holes, you have stars, you have illuminated beings, and you have dark sucking beings. So this is just the reality that we live in. So when you talk about reptilian Draco, of the nature of the ones that are not empathetic towards humans, this is at the root of the story of Enki and Enlil. And they have reptilian origins, they have Draco origins, both of them, because all of these ancient ones, they have been through the evolution, through the reptilian nature to the mammalian nature. This is why you'll see in the ancient Egyptian gods, for example, you'll see snake-headed gods. You'll also see like the cow goddess Hathor. The cow goddess Hathor is a manifestation of the cobra goddess Wadjet, but you see it as mother and daughter. It's not like they're clearly different species, but it's the evolution of consciousness through different vessels. And the human vessel is it's a mammalian form. And then you have the bird gods like Horus, who's my galactic soul. Like the type of soul that I am is Horus. It's a bird being. Yeah. And so you see that the cobra goddess has a vulture manifestation. And this speaks to the Kundalini life force, that Kundalini activation. You go from the reptilian, the crawling reptile, into the winged reptile, the dragon being. So that's an ascended matter that goes from the base reptilian, close to the ground, watery consciousness, into a consciousness that can take flight. So in this spectrum, you'll see that there are higher dimensional beings that look down on humans, that think they're foolish, that they're ignorant because they're unable to comprehend the complexity of life. And so they seek to deceive them. They seek to feed on them, feed on their energy. And that for them is a way of seeking more power, you know, of harnessing and hoarding power. But then there are other types of draconian beings that consider humans to be family. Maybe they are a little younger, maybe they're kindergarten like level, that they also deserve a chance at learning and ascending and evolving through time. So that's the of the Enki versus Enlil you know, gap.
Very good. Very good. And that's great. Dan, you've read the Lakota Files?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was reminding me of that. Forgive me, I've got a hard stop in 4 minutes. I have a Supreme Court judge and a general on a call at the top of the hour. That's in 4 minutes. So I have to make a hard stop in 3 minutes. But Dan, this has been a fantastic conversation. Dalia, thank you. And Dan, just want your closing thoughts.
And our best shaman agree, the high Draco, Siakar, eventually Seraphim, the winged Draco, most of them are noble, very evolved being, Seraphim. And so the winged dragon part of this, that's why, not to be critical here, but Elaine is saying, oh, you need the Federation to save you from Draco. No, this is a red herring. Dalia is more correct to say we need to see all of our ancestors in that entire lineage. And the high dragons are absolutely evolved, the Siakar and the advanced Seraphim. And so we see that in ourselves, when we have access to that bliss and that Kundalini, and the serpent becomes the eagle, and we become plasma projective with the ventricle wings and the winged, the bird tribe, and then we can project into the lucid dream, into the astral, and that's when we're coherent and we become immortal, and when we can become the global shaman that can save us.
Very good. Dan, Winter, Dalia, thank you so very much.
That was great, Dalia.
Thank you, Sasha.